guys, it's Tuesday, October the 4th, second day of a 2-day rally that, quite frankly, I'm just gonna be honest, I just don't trust it. And today what I've prepared is I'm gonna talk about this report from the UN trade, and it is called the Trade and Development Report that everybody's on and on about and very excited for, but I'm just like, what is this? For lack of a better way to describe it. And then I'm also gonna just preview a little bit of Apple. There's, I tell you, the release dates on these are sometimes so perfect because you really don't get much until essentially these companies report earnings. It's almost like they time this like a bunch of really smart people. Let's go through the markets really quick. Today, we can see the indices up crazy. This Russell, I got to tell you, there's no reason the Russell should be up 3+%. I mean, if there's one area that is really going to take it on the chin, it's small cap, so this recovery in the Russell to me is one that I am watching like a hawk and going a little bit farther out and trying to figure out where I want to short it because, the banks are going to be closed and they're going to be closed until this Credit Suisse situation resolves itself. And even though everybody's going to want banking fees, I don't know. This Russell thing doesn't make any sense. I want to give a shout out to Ray Dalio, who I have been admiring for years as just one of these amazing talking figures. So shout out Ray Dalio to step down from Bridgewater. He's leaving some really amazing people in his stead. It's not like there was a question mark on leadership there and who was going to potentially step down. So an amazing career, a very interesting man, plenty of books to read and plenty to learn. One of the strongest global macro people that you will meet, even though if you look at my Diary of a Speed Reader channel, you'll see I didn't totally 100% agree with everything, but that is less about him being anything but just having a different opinion. Okay, let's look at FinViz. You're seeing like literally everything up except for Welltower, which is the one company that I would have been bullish on, quite frankly. So I feel a little dumb today. But at the same time, I do think that overall, this market is so green. And I may even look at the dividend yield and try to figure out if there's a reason to buy Welltower, to be fair. But this market is so green. And there's really nothing that's driving it except for this UN report and conjectures of what might be implied. Like, are we going to lower rates? And it's really a question mark on that. It's really a question mark. We need to see what this quarter provides. We have been talking about the fact that rates may lower, but if we're lowering rates, or at least not raising them further, is it good for the markets? Is it bad for the markets? We still have all this crazy that's happening. It could be good for parts of the market. Let's go through it really quick. I'll just show you. So today's economic data was the job openings. We definitely saw a decrease in job openings, and that's great. And we saw that without hires and separations changing, which means people weren't leaving jobs anymore, which was what we were seeing. We were seeing both a lot of job openings and then a lot of people piecing out of their existing job and going to another job. And so that does demonstrate some stabilization, which is one of the things that the Fed really wanted to see. Now we need to see that for more than one data point, because we have not been seeing it for more than one data point. So one data point does not a Fed decision make is kind of one of the most important things to note. Now, the second thing that I wanted to mention is that, so we have some other data points coming out, but we also will have these companies reporting earnings. So I'll just keep reminding you guys that because tomorrow we'll start to get some of the food companies and we'll get a little bit of a better data point than this ridiculous, with all due respect, UN report, which is so clearly oriented for a political purpose. I mean, you couldn't possibly, let me just show you what it says so you can see it and you can decide, maybe you disagree with me. Let me do that first. Okay. So there's a few different things that even on the summary, they're asking countries to do. They're suggesting that the Fed and that all countries lower rates and stop attempting tightening because of its impact on the emerging markets, as well as domestically, the speed at which the slowdown has happened. And that is true, by the way. So thus far, the few companies that have come out have said that the slowdown was pretty significant, particularly overseas. Additionally, we even saw from some of the late retail earnings reports that the freight prices were really changing very dramatically. That said, it is a single data point in probably the weakest portion of retail sales. Now, some people would say that the freight number is probably the most interesting because freight does actually carry most of its inventory across the sea in October for November, December preparations. In fairness, it's like actually September, October. So please don't like slip of the tongue. Don't want a bunch of people upset with me on that. But that is truth right there. And there's a fairness to what's going on there. Realize though, for us, as relates to rates, again, rates can impact GDP growth. They can impact corporate spending for companies that are heavily using debt. So that's going to be like construction and heavy industry. They cannot change the oil price. They cannot change the price of food. Right now, interest rate increases are not driving oil prices, nor are they creating anything relating to food. Mother Nature and the failure to provision for grains, a war, and multi-years of droughts and poor climate conditions, not necessarily getting into global warming here. This is just, it didn't rain, okay? It's really what happened. That's what's causing this food shortage. We came in even before Ukraine with a palm oil shortage and then very low reserves on all of the grains. So this is not interest rates that drove it, okay? It just isn't interest rates, and interest rates will not take us out of it. The only thing that will take us out of it is Mother Nature and really, really great innovation and farm technology. And I'm going to show you how ridiculous this report is in the context of that as a result. And the thing is, I don't want to be caustic towards those that probably worked hard to put this together in a way that was politically sound, but nonetheless, it has the footprints of politics all over it. So here's one of the things they said in the report. It's a 70-page report. You can download it here, unctad.org, but you can look it up. It's Trade and Development Report 2022 by the UNCTAD, Trade and Development, UN Trade and Development is really what that is. Okay. This is one of the quotes from it. In theory, high relative prices stimulate investment today and more output tomorrow. They're talking about agriculture here, right? So the current increase in food prices should be attenuated in 2023. We're talking about ag, right? Like, I just want to be clear that we're talking about ag, right? In practice, because of the long-term effects of global warming and the short-term implication of high fertilizer prices for the next harvest cycle, the normalization of the world food market is far from taken for granted with the situation in sub-Saharan Africa in particular. And then they do name a few concerns, but here's the thing. We've interviewed folks for this show. We've talked about it. We've been listening to every earnings report related even remotely to ag. And there's not one corporation, there's not one professional in the industry that's thinking things are going to attenuate as relates to grain shortage, let alone food shortage, by the end of 2023. So this is very aggressive, number one. And number two, again, it's not a lack of investment that's causing this. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Okay, it's all of the conditions. Plus, I'm going to show you one other thing that has to do specifically with fertilizer, as relates to this idea of short-term high fertilizer prices declining. Have they declined a little bit? Yes. Are they going to generally decline? No. We just went through that the other day in our video on CF Industries. Nitrogen, which they don't mention in this report, they only mention phosphate because phosphate has to do with Belarus, and they can kind of talk about how you can bring phosphate online. But nitrogen isn't going anywhere. And we're going to talk about that. And I'll remind you in just 1 second. Here, let me just show you. This is the graphs that we produced yesterday. Oops, sorry. Here is the price of fertilizer per ton in Illinois, which is just as good a place to take the price anywhere. We take it in the middle part of America because that's closer to where people are actually farming. So this is a good price. Okay, let's just call it like that. It may not be the global price, but it's a good price for the United States, which is a huge farming country that actually produces its fertilizer. So it's not going to have any additional stuff going on. Okay, the blue number is what we talked about as relates to nitrogen, DAP, potassium and phosphate in green. Okay, what drives the price of ammonium? We talked about this the other day. Nat gas drives the price of ammonium, friends. And this is the price of nat gas. So I have no idea how they're thinking, oh, it's just going to magically dissipate. Yeah, it might come down from 1469, but it's not coming down until we can get this down, right? Number one. And number two, grain prices aren't coming down until this comes down, because the one thing that you could switch nat gas into as a substitute is ethanol. And what does ethanol come from? Grains. And what do we have? A grain shortage. So I don't know what this report, does this report, I think there was It's almost like when you're reading a report, someone was told, whatever you do, don't mention oil, and so as a result, it's mysteriously missing in all of the sections in any kind of meaningful, hearty discussion. It's really strange. Now, here's another thing that they're talking about. Excessive, and there's 2 chapters in it. You can read them both, but this is from the first part. The importance of exports from the region, uncertainty. So the law, so they talk about the uncertainty of how long the war would drag on also fueled speculation. Excessive speculation on commodity markets likely amplified the price increases for grains that allowed the start of the war, that followed the start of the war. Okay, and then they say it again down here. The conclusion was that the growing participation of financial investors in commodity trading for purely financial motives was a contributing factor to price rises. I would say kind of, okay, and we're going to get back to that. Just hold that. And the reason I would say kind of is let's just take a really good and close look at what happened to grain prices. Here is the price of grain. Here's what they're talking about, this rise immediately after the war is announced, and it goes through the summer. Now let's talk about what March to June actually is. That's your spring planting season. That's when you don't have a lot of data on how good the crop is going to be, and you're just taking in report after report on what the damage is. This price, it is the futures market, so it is going to reflect the uncertainty associated with it, and subsequently it's just cracked straight down as relates to the chart for wheat, and we do see backwardation in almost all of these. So this probably more than anything represents the immediate stockpiling, i.e. demand, that comes straight after. And just remember, okay, here in the United States, this is a physical delivery contract, okay? It's not, just speculation, which can happen, and absolutely, I'm not denying that any financial person, let alone companies, would come in, even though they're saying it's speculators, and I agree with them, it was speculators, okay? We're not going to pretend that that's not true, but is it unjustified, or is it awkward, or is it causing a long-term rise in wheat and grain prices? No, because look at this, straight down. And right now, I would say that this price is probably wrong. And it's not me saying it. It's like literally the grain people in Kansas City are like, this price is wrong given what we're seeing. So, and there's a lot of great YouTube channels. I'll try to pin one below that I listen to that I think they're amazing experts and incredible research, physically located in Kansas City, which is one of the bigger grain harvest areas. So this statement, I'm not sure what they're looking at. I love that this is actually, the citation on this is from 2011. I think that's really relevant, especially if we look at this fertilizer. Look, I think what they missed is it's not speculation, okay? What's actually driven, which we talked about in our video for CF Industry, what's driven the price of grain downward is a decade of having low fuel prices, nat gas prices, which is a huge component input into fertilizer. This is not me saying it. One of the most brilliant people, in my opinion, that does research on this is Rosenzweig and Gehrig. I'm a real fan of those guys. They are real true professionals, and they have said it almost for since 2020, I want to say 2019, they were concerned at the fact that this has been strangely low for a while. And this also represents the fact that we asked the oil companies to stop producing from 2021. We all like to pretend that we did not do that, but we in fact did when oil went a certain way. So, let's just move that to the right, because none of that was in the report either. And then here's what they're actually saying is one of the recommendations, which I believe, this is why I'm upset, is because I think this is actually straight up dangerous to extremely insulting to the exchanges. But I'm sure the exchanges will come out very democratically, because those professionals are outstanding people that run those exchanges. This is what they want you to do. They want greater transparency in the physical markets through provisions of more timely and accurate information about commodities, such as spare capacity, global stock holdings for oil, etc. Okay, we have this is not a new market, so I find that a little bit insulting to people that already do this work, but okay, we'll just go with it. Maybe there's some other vision that they have that could make it even faster. It is Mother Nature, and she doesn't really tell us until the harvest happens. The second thing that I find a little bit crazy, especially with respect to position, so a better flow of and access to information in commodity derivatives, especially with respect to position taking by different categories of market participants. Basically, what they're saying is they want market participants to identify themselves. And that, to me, demonstrates no understanding of what a free market is. So that to me is just straight up weird. I don't know how they certainly didn't go into details on it in any way, shape, or form, but that sentence by itself cannot stand in my opinion, because if you have to give up who's buying and selling, you might as well just end all capital markets, period, and just like figure it out from there and see how things roll. Probably not very well, since this market was created, but it's one of the oldest markets around. This is the next one that really bothers me. Tighter regulation of financial market participants, such as setting position limits to reduce financial investors' impact on commodity markets. For example, prop trading by financial institutions in hedging transactions of their clients could be prohibited because of conflicts of interest. So you're going to destabilize one part of the market to make the other part of the market to feed people. You're going to massively destabilize the banking system to do it. Smart. That totally makes sense, given that we're working through credit Swift. Anyways, all of these are a little bit disturbing. This one is the only one that isn't. The CFTC should increase margin requirements. I don't have a problem with them doing that, but that's for the CFTC to decide, because, that probably is relevant if you're going to enter a period of higher speculation. And there's from time to time margin requirements can be increased. Usually they're telegraphed aggressively in advance. This will, however, and always does, suck a little bit of liquidity out of the markets. So that really drove me crazy. I promised a little bit on Apple. Oh, these were the other things that came out of the report that were interesting. The three main types of vessels that were coming out. Maybe I'll save Apple for tomorrow, but now let me go do Apple after this really quickly. Bulk is just regular clothing items coming from overseas. Oil and chemical is up a lot, as we know, because basically this is being shipped to areas that don't have it. And then foodstuffs, you can see, is moderated. That just has to do with the time of year, is my guess on it. We'll probably see that tick up. Or if we don't see it tick up, that's like not a great sign, because it means that we don't produce enough to have it tick up in the countries, or that the countries are in fact stockpiling a little bit. So that is something to note from it. And finally, oh, you know what? I'm going to split this. I'll do Apple tomorrow, and I'll just have to figure out how to cut that a little bit in the beginning. But with that, given that we've already gone to 20 minutes, let me stop share. And I don't know if there's any questions on that.
Hey, mate. Yeah. I mean, it's really crazy that the UN is trying to set monetary policy. I mean, but it's kind of a signal that they think the world economy is really in trouble.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it is the United Nations. And so you're going to have, it's really Europe, I think, driving this more than anything, is my guess. And I get that. I see where they're coming from, and I understand, but you can't ask a country to do anything but what's in its best interest economically. It's awkward. And then if it has surplus, it should donate that. Like that would be a more normal request, do you know? Something that's just, you need to cut interest rates to help us out, which in fairness, the report didn't say that directly at any different point. So I did think that was a little bit strange, given all the things I just presented that are even more problematic. Like, hey, I want tighter regulations on the commodities market. And there's, you know what I mean? Like, I want to destroy the liquidity. I mean, look, I'm sorry, I might be a little extreme, but since they were extreme in the way they reported it this morning and missed what to me is the bigger problem, which is like, you have no business, United Nations academics, and telling the very well-regulated commodity markets what they should or should not be doing. Guess what? Those people actually do a lot to try to regulate properly. Can you imagine? I mean, you were on the floor of the exchange, right?
It's so
That's ridiculous. It's so regulated. Yes, there's speculators. Without them, there would be no liquidity, right? So try and take them out and see how the market is.
Speculators are trading for a check sometimes.
Are trading for what?
One or two checks. I mean, they are liquidity, exactly.
Yeah. So it's the most ridiculous. These statements are really ridiculous. Now, in fairness, the one market where you can still have things be cornered in a particularly nasty way would be actually the metals market. That's why I'm thinking that this is informed by the UK more than it's formed, more than they really bothered to ask. And I mean, maybe they did. I will feel so bad if there's someone on this committee at the CME that spoke through it. But wow, I mean, or alternatively, the way it's articulated is understated relative to the provisions that they would like to have the CME do. But the way it's stated currently in that report is a problem for me personally, emotionally, and as a person that's been in this market for a long time. And also I'm like, what? Because if they did that, I would be very concerned about the food supply.
Did they mention position limits?
Let's go back. Yeah. They said for
All position limits.
I know. Crazy. I know there already are. So I'm not sure if they're gonna make it even more aggressive. But the idea of identifying yourself in the marketplace before you trade.
Yeah, that's weird.
It's so weird. And it's not like we can't tell who you are when you pile in like a more, you know what I mean? Like, do we not know that if you take this massive position that you're probably X, Y, and Z? It's as if like, you know what I mean? So that all of that drove me, obviously, when I was like, when I read it, I had to read it.
Pretty uninformed.
Yeah. And then this whole idea that we're going to somehow come up with a bunch of agriculture. I'm not saying that we're not. I'm saying that it is not going to be a function of what monetary policy does. We need to actually grow more food, and we need to figure that out. And oh, by the way, the major way we could grow more food, since we're going into the fall months, which means it all depends on the southern hemisphere, is to cut down rainforests. So you can imagine me reading this, like not happy with all the things that they sidestepped, you know, and all of the things they probably, you know, either fuel prices have to go down so that nitrogen is completely missing in this report. Nitrogen, which is even more important. As much as I am a big fan of Mosaic potassium phosphate, I'm not completely clueless that nitrogen is the more important in NPK. Do you know what I mean?
And you need natural gas for that. Okay.
Yeah, at this current state in history, that's how I mean, the other thing you could technically make nitrogen from is coal. China does it that way, but like, it's not oh my gosh, that's like way worse than using that gas, you know, and it's just like the whole discussion, nitrogen itself completely missing from the report, especially since Russia, like I showed you in the CF thing, is the 4th largest producer. It's like the most ridiculous report on the topic that I've ever. And I know that these people are probably very bright. Like, I don't want to be insulting. That's why I'm saying that it has the handprints and fingerprints of politicians all over this stupid report.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't want to, any academic that worked on this, I absolve you of all things. I get it. Right now is a very power keg of a geopolitical time, and you have to do what you have to do. I absolve you of this report if you yourself are also kind of like not wanting to own up to it. Like, you know, it's just like so many fingerprints on this one.
Got it.
Anyway,
the best, man. You're the best.
No, I appreciate that. Let's see how this markets go. Everybody be very careful out there, because it's very clear to me from this report that the world is prepared to manipulate these markets. That's my bottom line from it anyway.
Exactly.
Weird.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye.